A few short weeks from now, Nintendo is going to reveal their 6th home console to the public at E3 2011. And I want to talk some more about that and what it means for Nintendo and for gaming and for the fans. And I could talk some more about what features it might have, how powerful it might be, addressing some of the rumors and speculation that have been circling the web, as you'd expect in a case like this. But really, I think the most interesting and worthwhile video I could make would really be to put Nintendo's 6th console in perspective. What that means for Nintendo's business, what it means for their fan base, what it means for the mass market. And really, when it comes down to it, I think Nintendo, when it comes to the home console business, you could think of it as a race. In the generation in which the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, and the Xbox, and the Dreamcast 2 were competing. You could say Dreamcast, they spun out, they crashed, and they are not in the race anymore. You know, PlayStation 2, they came in first, and we have Xbox as second, and generally speaking. And we have Nintendo coming in last. 3rd place out of 3, you're losing. When you're 3rd place out of 3 in a race, you lost. You could be going 100 miles an hour, you could be, putting the pedal to the floor and driving really well, but when you're 3rd place out of 3, of course, you could spin that however you like, but when you're 3rd place out of 3, you're losing. With this current race, we now have Nintendo's Wii in 1st place, and we have Microsoft and Sony's home consoles competing for 2nd and 3rd place. And of course, you can't really, you're not going to say that people have argued that the GameCube was a failed system and that they failed to achieve Nintendo's goals of dominating market share. We have the PlayStation 3, the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, competing for 2nd place. It would seem to me that the 360 has definitely won in terms of market share. And we have Sony this time pulling in the rear, which very few people back in 2005 when they first showed the PlayStation 3, very few people would have dared to expect that as the outcome. And so we have Nintendo in first, but who are the people in the stands cheering for? What you'd call the hardcore, what I'm going to call the traditional gamer, the gamer who's been playing video games as a primary hobby, and before Nintendo's audience expansion campaign with the Nintendo DS and Wii. The people who've been playing before that for a long time. Most of the people in those stands, they're watching, who they're cheering for, who they're interested in, where their interests lie, is mainly just my perception. I could be wrong. I don't have numbers and charts. Let's say there are 1,000 people in the stands at the races. That 1,000 people, most of them are probably cheering for the PlayStation 3 and 360. And let's say 900 of them are cheering for following the 360 and PS3. And the thing is, Nintendo's number one. They've won the race. They're far ahead. They've lapped the competition many times over in terms of market share. But they're so far ahead. They're running a different race on the same track almost. They're competing on a different level than what the 360 and PlayStation 3 have been. And you can see in some of the advertising for PlayStation 3 and the way they've marketed the Kinect and the Move, they want to compete on that level. Microsoft and Sony, they want to compete on every level and get as much market share as they can. I even saw a Kevin Butler ad specifically addressing, sort of going against the stereotype that PlayStation 3 is nothing but grimdark first-person shooters. That, hey, we have a good family selection in our system too. Check it out. So it's interesting that they're you can see that they want to move into that space too. Now I'm digressing a bit, so excuse me. So we have Nintendo by far in first, but with only of what you saw the core, the traditional fan base that are up in the stands at the racetrack watching. Not a lot of those people, they aren't rooting for them. A lot of the people who are rooting for Nintendo, they're what I'd call the casual, the expanded audience. Those are the people who are watching, the millions watching the race on TV. The people who aren't dedicated enough to get really into it and go to the racetrack and tailgate and be in the stand seeing it in person, out of those, that's the hardcore. And out of those people, a lot of them really don't see the Wii as a relative platform to them. Even if a lot of the people who don't have a Wii and have the other systems, a lot of them, they don't hate Nintendo. They don't dislike Nintendo. But they perceive, or either falsely or rightfully so, that this system isn't for them. It doesn't pertain to their interests. Nintendo, for the sixth home console from Nintendo, is I think what I feel is going to be about. It's going to be about taking everything that satisfied their fans with the NES, the Super NES, the N64, the GameCube, and the ones who are into Wii. Everything, they're going to want to take everything that got the hardcore fans in the stands cheering for their previous systems. They're going to want to take that and everything that made the Wii such a massive mainstream hit with the expanded audience, not just the people, the 1,000 in the stands, but the millions who are watching at home on TV. They want to take everything that made their previous systems popular with the hardcore and marry that to what made the Wii such a mainstream mass market hit. And that's really going to be what the new system is about. The Wii really changed the way a lot of people thought about Nintendo. A lot of the same critics who were saying, oh, Nintendo's abandoned the traditional gamer, the hardcore gamer, even if the mature gamer, if you want to take it to that level. The people who said that about the GameCube, a lot of them still aren't satisfied with the Wii. And would be that a critic who's just, commentating someone on a website or on G4 or whatever, or if you want to take that from the gamers to say like, oh, there's nothing on Wii for me, who cares about the Wii, whatever. If you want to take those people, I'm not really sure. I can understand the perception, but this is my opinion, if you look at the Wii's total library throughout its lifespan, Nintendo themselves, I feel, have put out the best selection of first and second party games they've put out on a single system since perhaps the Super Nintendo. As far as Nintendo's first and second party is concerned, for the most part, I really don't see how any Nintendo fan, any gamer who bought the N64 and enjoyed it, who bought the GameCube and enjoyed it, could then play the Wii and feel that they've been abandoned in favor of the Wii Sports, Wii Fit expanded audience. It doesn't make sense to me. It's true that a lot of those games, they've been released very sparingly throughout Nintendo's lifespan, the Wii's lifespan. And if you want to take the third party, I think overall they've gotten better third party support. They've got better third party interest perhaps with the Wii, but not better support, because the GameCube definitely had third party support issues. But one of the things that I think helped was the fact that the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox were all pretty comparable in terms of their power. Any game on the on the PlayStation 2 could be done on the GameCube. Within reason, any game on the Xbox could have been executed on the GameCube with, you know, some performance hits, you know, graphically. You know, you saw a lot of games released across all three systems, whereas this generation, a lot of the traditional games you'd see on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 and not on the Wii, just because it was such a different system. It was such a, relatively speaking, such a backward system, even though it was significantly more powerful than the GameCube. Just compare Smash Bros. Brawl and Smash Bros. Melee. There's a significant graphical improvement. Look at Super Mario Sunshine compared to Super Mario Galaxy 2. There's a significant improvement, but compared to, it was just really vastly underpowered compared to the competition. Now, if you want to, what I really want to say about that is, I think a lot of developers were interested in the Wii, that they just looked at it and really felt that they couldn't create what they wanted to create on Nintendo's system. And that's a legitimate concern for a developer. And I think, based on some of the gossip I've been seeing from developers concerning Nintendo's sixth system, I think we're going to possibly see some developers who we probably wouldn't expect turning to Nintendo. You know, Rockstar, for instance, they are not particularly known for, you know, there's no Grand Theft Auto on the Wii, there was no Grand Theft Auto on GameCube, but in those same generations, there was a Grand Theft Auto for the Game Boy Advance, there's a Grand Theft Auto for the Nintendo DS. Nintendo released Bully for Wii. So I think Rockstar, for instance, you're going to see a lot of developers who maybe you wouldn't think of as developing Nintendo games or games you'd see on Nintendo consoles going to Nintendo's next system. And it's really, what does a new system mean? Nintendo is a company that they will not release a new system until they're absolutely sure they've maxed out the potential of their current system. With the Super NES, they stuck with that system even when a host of different 32 and 64-bit super systems were coming out that used CD media, that had better specs. And a lot of these systems turned out to be really short-lived, turned out to be really disappointing of their promise of, you know, this is the new system, this is going to blow away the 16-bit consoles, the Super NES and Genesis are just toys. And meanwhile, Nintendo, they made Donkey Kong Country with their obsolete, or their underpowered, their old system that looked better than a lot of the games that were coming out on these $300 CD-based 32 and 64-bit systems, and it just shows why Nintendo really runs their systems the way they do. They will not wait until they've fully played out their hand with the system they're out now, and with that's how they did the GameCube, even though there was a perception that, oh, you know, they have to hurry up and get their new system out, because Xbox is releasing a year earlier than everyone else expected. So now that there's a new system coming out, and even though they've came out with a good selection of games for Wii, I think it's been relatively quiet. Even though they had a good showing last year, I think there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on for their next system. And we're going to probably be surprised by what we see. Nintendo always surprises us, but there's going to be some different... I expect to see new games, and reinventions of the games we'd expect to see. And what that means to me is, look at what I believe, I'm going to, off the top of my head, the last major home console Zelda entries. Let's go from Majora's Mask for the sake of it. Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword. There is no mistaking any of those games for each other. Take the last 4 Call of Duty games. Take the last 4 Halo games. And take the last 4 major entries of most franchises that have been out. They do not look dramatically different from one to the other. The interface might be, the hub, like the on-screen interface might be a little different. Take the last Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, and new Super Mario Bros Wii. I'm just talking about the home consoles here. Yes, Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 could be mistaken for each other effectively, but that's because they were sort of direct sequels to each other in a sort of unique way that normally wouldn't happen with Super Mario games. There's no mistaking any of those games for each other. The most magical moment of me for Nintendo's E3 2010 media briefing, the moment where I was really captivated and where my imagination really ran wild, was when they showed Kirby's Epic Yarn. To see something familiar be transformed so radically and yet be so true to its nature. That's the reason Nintendo has made so many. You could reasonably criticize them for riding on the laurels of these historic franchises that have been out since the 80s. But the reason people still go back to them, why they're still relevant to the kids who are just getting into it, why they're still nostalgic for the people who played it when they were young, and why it's still engaging regardless of its nostalgia, why they're still good, worthwhile experiences, is because they do change. The next Nintendo system, I think the crux of this system is going to be radically transforming the way we think about classic characters, and they're going to change the way they're going to change Nintendo games. The Wii was about changing Nintendo's business, I believe. They changed who they can sell games to, who games can be marketed to, who they can get behind the controller. And in doing that, they did a lot of really crazy stuff. I think the next system will be about changing the games and changing the gaming universe itself. And what I could say that, and I could say that, and it could mean whatever, and Nintendo could come out with whatever, and I could say, oh look, I was correct in my prediction that Nintendo games would be changed. But really, I'm gonna lay something on the table right now. The Super Mario game that's going to be revealed for Nintendo 3DS will be taking Mario Galaxy, I think, and putting it more into the context, into the setting, into the feel of Super Mario Bros. 3, and sort of mixing that with the Mario 64 experience. I don't expect a lot of the gravity-based gameplay to be set in the Starry Sky sort of universe. It's going to be sort of a reboot for 3D Mario, as we've known it thus far with Mario 64, Sunshine, Galaxy 1 and 2. But with all that in mind, I expect it to be relatively conservative. What will Nintendo do for the Super Mario game on the 6th home console? I expect to see that. I could imagine it really being the game that shows what this system is going to be all about. What will its new features, how will that be applied to a game, a franchise, a universe we're already familiar with? And you could think, how can Mario transform? And think of how Zelda, just the look of it alone, think of how totally unique interpretations of Zelda they have been. The first part is, you can't expect it. It has to be something we're not expecting, something that's going to take us totally off guard. Something really striking where you look at that and say, wow, that's Mario. That's, I'm using Mario as my key example here. That's something I know, and we've seen, and we think we've seen everything he has to offer, but this is totally different. How could that happen again for Mario? I'm going to share not what this isn't my prediction. It's just something to jog your imagination as to how Mario, for instance, can change again radically on a system with I'm using radically a lot, pardon me, with significantly more power than the Wii, with possibly radically different features in the controller that we haven't experienced before. How do you make a Mario game look new from just looking at it, saying that's Mario and that looks entirely new? Excuse me if I'm repeating myself a bit. One possible idea, something to jog your imagination, I saw in an article from Destructoid. He was talking about what he expected from Nintendo's 6th console. And to illustrate his point, he featured a piece of fan art of Super Mario running through a fairly familiar scene in a very painterly style, even more so than Skyward Sword has a painterly look, even more so than that. Very warm, very colorful, and it's quintessentially, the scene is quintessential Mario, but it's so different than New Super Mario Bros. Wii. It's so different from Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. And take a look at those games and compare it to this screenshot, this piece of fan art. And just think about, really the sky's the limit in terms of how Nintendo can change their games, how they could create new games that look so different and feel so different from what we were expecting and what's familiar to us. And yet it's still, inviting, it's still really, I think I've said it. But really the next system, it's going to be about really changing the way we think about what a Nintendo system could be and everything that entails, from their first and second party games to the sorts of games we'll be seeing from third parties. And that's what I have to say about that. And to speculate a bit about the controller, when I hear rumors of streaming things to the controller, a multi-touch screen on the controller in addition to buttons, if this turns out to be true, Nintendo, if this what I imagine when I think of these things, I don't have the complete picture if this is true, but I'm imagining a very expensive controller and a very complex sort of thing that I really can't wrap my brain around. So, like I said before, they may end up having it so that the Motion Plus freehand controller is the standard controller for a lot of games. But in terms of this rumored multi-touch, or I'm asserting multi-touch into it, because a touchscreen controller, I'd expect multi-touch for it to be useful in any really significant way. And what I think of when I hear about this controller, I think about the NGP, that touch-sensitive surface on the back of the system. I'm thinking something along those lines, almost, in terms of how that sort of input could be applied to a game. But, like I said, I'm just commenting on a rumor right now. I'm expecting something totally out of left field. I'm not expecting I could say what I feel is the new system's going to be about. But what I'm expecting, I don't have any expectations. I'm just sitting back. I'm not, searching Google News every day to hear the latest whisper of what Nintendo's new system's going to be about. I'm just going to sit back, and at E3, I'm just going to see what they have, what they're going to show. I expect to be taken by surprise in the same way that I was with the look of Skyward Sword. I'll maybe, if they have another viewing at Nintendo World, I'll go attend that, or if not, I'll be watching at home on G4 and online. So that's it until the next system is revealed, and thank you very much for watching.